Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Pink Fresh Studio. In today's video, I'm going to share with you how to create this shaker card using the Happy Holidays Circle Frame Stencils, Stamp, and Die Set. We're going to start with the Happy Holidays Circle Frame Stamp Set. I'm going to start with that main image there. I'm going to center it onto an A2 panel of Kraft cardstock, and I am going to heat emboss, so I'm going to apply some anti-static powder first, and then I'll ink up the stamp in VersaMark ink. Then I'll stamp that panel, and then I'm going to pour on some white embossing powder. This is going to create a really kind of pretty, almost gingerbread sort of look. At least that's what it reminds me of. So here I am just dipping it into the white embossing powder. After I tap off the excess, then I will heat set with my heat tool. I love how detailed this image is. It has a ton of holly berries and holly leaves. It's just really pretty, perfect for Christmas. So now that I'm done with my heat embossing, I'm going to move on to ink blending. I have a stencil, actually the leaf stencil from the Happy Holidays Circle Frame stencil set, placed it over my image, and now I'm ink blending those leaves with Espresso Pink Fresh Dye ink. This is a brown ink, and it's going to create kind of a tone-on-tone leaf look. Those leaves are going to be a little bit darker than that Kraft cardstock, so they'll pop a little bit. Now I'm going to clean up my heat embossed areas because I have some of that residual ink left on it because of my ink blending with those leaves. So I just used a dry towel to clean that up. Now moving on to coloring these berries, I'm using a pigment marker here so it'll show up beautifully over that Kraft cardstock. If you don't have a pigment marker, you can also use a colored pencil that will work really well also. So now that I finished those berries, my image is actually all done and I'm ready to die cut it out. So I'm going to grab the Happy Holidays Circle Frame die set, which you see here. I'm going to use that large frame die and just place it over my image and run it through my die cutting machine. And after I die cut it, I'll be left with this beautiful, again, kind of gingerbread-like frame. And I'll take that circle out and actually save that for later, but the frame is the main focus. That's what's going to be on the front of our card. So now I'm going to move on to my card base. I have an A2 top folding Kraft card base, and I'm going to ink blend the top and bottom with some more of that espresso ink. I am trying to create a little bit of a gradation so it has a fun kind of ombre look. This is going to add a lot of depth and interest to our background. So now that's done, I'm going to move on to our other elements that we need to build our shaker card. I have an A2 panel of white cardstock as well as an A2 panel of white craft foam. I went ahead and die cut both those with the Happy Holidays Circle Frame die, and I'm going to put away the craft foam circle insert. I'm not going to use that, but all of the white cardstock frame and the craft foam frame I will use. Now I'm going to move on to creating my acetate layer. I have some acetate, and I've grabbed that craft circle, and I'm now going to trace around that circle with a permanent marker onto the acetate, but I am leaving a 1/8 of an inch border. I don't want to trace right up against the edge of that circle because it needs to be a little bit bigger so it can completely seal the window so we don't have any of our shaker elements popping out. After I trace it, I just cut it out with my scissors, and again, this doesn't have to be a really perfect circle. It's going to be covered by that craft frame. So now, after I finish that acetate, I actually have everything ready to put my shaker together. I'm going to start by centering my craft frame down on my card front. I'm using a couple pieces of tape just to hold it in place. Then I'm going to add some glue inside that circle opening and then actually adhere my white cardstock circle inside. Once I get that set inside, I'll then remove the craft foam frame, and then I'll actually glue the white cardstock frame right on top. So I'm going to just nestle that frame right over that adhered down circle. I just centered that circle first just to make sure I had that circle in the right spot before I adhered everything else first, or everything else after. Now moving on to the craft foam frame. So this is that dimensional layer. Added some adhesive to the back of that and adhered that directly on top of the cardstock frame. Now I'll place one of my plates from my die cutting machine on top of it as it dries. Moving on to the top frame, which is the craft frame, I'm going to add some adhesive to the back side of it and adhere that acetate circle that we cut out right to the back side. Once I've got that stuck down, I'll put that to the side and let that dry a little bit. While that's drying, we're actually ready to move back to our card base and fill that well that we created with I'm using a bunch of different things, some white seed beads, some clear seed beads, as well as some white and clear sequins. So I'm making my own little mix here, filling that well. And now that my well is filled, I'm going to add adhesive to the back side of my Kraft frame. And then I will just stick it right on top to seal that shaker card shut. And all those seed beads and those sequins will stay inside that well nice and secure. So, and I will place a plate from my die cutting machine on top while that glue sets a little bit. Okay, so now that the glue is dry, I'll hold up so you can see that shaker in action. All that pretty sparkle from the beads and the sequins is just a nice little touch for our card. Now we're going to move on to creating a little wreath here. I have the Leafy Circle die and some white glitter cardstock. So I just went ahead and die cut that white glitter cardstock with the die to create that little wreath. And then we're going to move on to our sentiment. So I have some red mirrored cardstock here, and I'm going to stamp a sentiment from the Happy Holidays circle frame stamp set onto this cardstock. I am doing heat embossing, so I did apply some anti-static powder first, stamped it in VersaMark ink here, and now I'm going to dip it into some white embossing powder. Now that I've got the embossing powder on it, I'll just heat set it with my heat tool. And that that mirrored cardstock is just a really nice backdrop for the sentiment. It's really pretty. So now I've grabbed the matching die and just die cut it out, and you have that beautiful sentiment ready for our card. Now I'm going to move on to creating a bow. I have the artistic bow die set here, and I'm going to make this kind of two looped bow here. I went ahead and die cut my parts out of that same mirrored red cardstock, and first thing I'm going to do after I've die cut them is kind of bend the paper here so it folds or kind of creates the bow nicely. So I'm using the handle of a thick paintbrush. Really anything will do as long as it's round and kind of on the thicker side. So I'm just kind of rolling the paper over that handle to get a nice curve. After I've curved the main part, I'm going to move on to this centerpiece here. This is going to be right in the direct middle of the bow and just giving that a nice curve too. So I'm curving all the parts that need to be curved. Now I have these glue dots. I'm going to add a glue dot to the back center of this main piece here, and then I'll fold over those tabs to create the two loops on my bow. So I'm just connecting them, pressing them down onto that glue dot. Now that I have that stuck, I'm going to grab my centerpiece here, the one that I curved, and I'm going to add this, but I realized I was adding it to the wrong place. I want to make sure that the ends of that centerpiece go to the glue dot as well. They kind of go exactly where the ends of the first piece went, so they all kind of connect there. Makes it nice and tidy. Then I'm going to add another glue dot to the back side again, and it also holds down all those tabs, which is nice, but that'll hold down this piece here, the last piece, kind of the tail end of the bow to the back side. And now I'm just kind of fluffing that bow back up, and we have our beautiful cardstock bow ready to go. So now I just have to complete this by adhering everything. I'm going to start with that glitter frame. I'm going to add a little bit of Nuvo crystal drops to the backside. This is Morning Dew, so it's clear. I think this makes it stick nicely to the acetate, so I'm using that instead. Then I'll put my plate on top while that wreath kind of dries. While the wreath is dry, I'm going to add some foam adhesive to the backside of my sentiment to give that a little bit of lift. So I'm cutting all little pieces here, removing the backing on those pieces, and once I get this last piece off, I'll flip it over and add it right on top of that wreath, right in the center of my shaker. Now that I have my sentiment in place, all I have left to do is that bow. I'm going to use one more glue dot to stick that down. Just press it in the upper left corner of my card. This is a nice little embellishment. I think it also brings in more of that red, which I think is pretty. And stick that bow down. My card is complete. I'll hold it to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details of this card. I really love the kind of gingerbready, homey feel of the Kraft and the white embossing. And then we even have that beautiful sparkle from the sequins and the seed beads, and that beautiful shine from the mirrored cardstock. Just a really fun and festive card. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.